Are you ready to have your mind blown? This episode features all of our guests from this season reading samples from their books. So grab a cup of coffee and get relaxed. Let them lure you into their stories. Don't forget to check back to previous episodes to catch the full episode where we explore each of these featured characters in depth. I'm your host, Madilynn Dale. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment. Let us know who was your favorite character this season. Enjoy.
Merlis soon left the smoke behind. The rising moon gave more than enough light for a cat, and she neither saw nor heard any sign of the wolf. She sneezed to clear her nostrils of smoke residue. A working nose meant more to her than a rudder to a ship. The landscape came alive with smells. There were night-blooming flowers. The ground shed the heat it had collected from the sun, carrying the smell of roots and worms, snails and fungi. A mole pushed through the dirt, caught her scent, and disappeared. Rodents crossed her path, and she crossed their trails. The cat wanted to chase them. Merlis suppressed the instinct. Hagnar's Bane was a squat hill studded with outcrops. An invading chieftain had led his war band past this hill and had lost his life and those of all the men in an ambush. War had been cruel and efficient in those days, like nature. No one living knew of Hagnar. So many invaders, and some much more successful, had followed. She doubted anyone called this hill by any name. Merlis sniffed deeply as she approached the hill. The outcrops provided cover for predator and prey alike. She scented a fox with her kits. A badger was moving west. No wolves. She moved ahead and rounded the base of the hill to its eastern slope. She sensed the old death of Hagnar and his slaughtered band. There were remnants of power here. Magical power came from many sources, but nothing created it like the violent change from life to death on the large scale of a battle. The power permeated the rocks as blood had soaked the soil. Most of the power had bled away by now, but combined with the fire beneath the hill and the moon, she reasoned there was enough magical energy for a decent scry. There would have been no doubt in Aelwit's marsh. She knew where a stone circle once marked the intersection of 4 ley lines. The circle had marked the place until one terrible day when the ground rolled like swells in the sea. The high ground had become flooded low ground, and the stones had sunk in the mud. Like Hagnar's hapless warband, the stone circle had been lost to memory. The gurgle of water over rocks focused her attention to her task and awakened her thirst. Her ears guided her to a wet cleft at the base of an outcrop. A thin stream of water fell onto a series of rocks down the slope. At the base of the hill, the water pooled in a shallow, natural rock bowl before dripping over the edge to a stream that wound across the moor to the river Ogwicka. Merlis looked about, sniffed for predators, and then stretched her head over the pool. The moon reflected off the smooth surface, and the silhouette of her pointed ears loomed large against it. She lapped at the water. Cool and fresh, it soothed her parched throat. She brought a forepaw to her mouth and bit until she tasted blood. She held her paw over the pool and watched a few drops fall. The blood dispersed into red threads stretched along the current. She sat on her haunches. Her breathing slowed as she relaxed and focused on the water, opening her mind to the elements. Power crept up her spine. The moon showered her with energy from above, soaking through her back. Her mind buzzed, and the cat wanted to run away from all the prickling sensations. The summoning spell was not complex. She had learned it early on in her training to be a shaman, but it required power and talent. Her soul sight gave her an edge. Some acolytes never mastered scrying. It would drain her, but the clues to the future, however obfuscated, would pay for the effort. Her spirit slid into a gap between the physical and spiritual worlds. She saw through a thick gray mist, but she was no longer using her physical sight. Tendrils of power waved before her like moss in a slow current. There was hers, faint and yellowish, that from the ancient battle reached skyward from the soil in red strands. The moon's power shone in a bright light, dazzling to behold. She wove tendrils from each source together and spoke the words to bring the future. In her cat's voice, the phrases sounded like yowling, but as she had determined from previous scribes, the thought behind the words rather than their pronunciation carried the summons. The pool flashed orange with red, with fire. Pain and worry ached in her bones. Fear stabbed her heart. Scrying was as much about feeling as seeing. Cats lumbered past behind the flames. Their wheels and sides seemed to be made of fire that did not consume. Figures in the carts writhed, not as one animal, but many creeping forms, crawling one over the other in some perpetual game of King of the Mountain. Merlis narrowed her eyes. These creatures we called beetles toiling over a dung mound, but the shapes were not right. These beetles threatened with pinchers, and their segmented tails dragged behind. A man snatched one of the beasts, and then dropped it into a cauldron. She leaned farther over the pool, and lowered her head to see more. The fire lunged and snapped at her nose. An illusion, she knew, but the cat's instinct sent her leaping backward. The smells of the night assaulted her. She saw the moor with her night vision. A mosquito buzzed in her ear. No. She scurried back to the pool. The moon's reflection mocked her. The scrying spell was broken. She cursed the cat. Merlis collapsed onto her side, her wobbly legs no longer supporting her. The sharp edge of the rock poked her ribs, but she didn't move. The effort exceeded the annoyance. She needed a place to rest before walking home. The outcrops on the hill would suffice for a nap, and time to think about what she had seen. Bats flitted overhead, chasing mosquitoes and moths. She breathed deeply. Purring soothed her. Lying in the open left her exposed, but sometimes being small and gray was an advantage. Moonlight silvered her fur. She soaked in what power the moon offered and flexed her claws as some strength returned. When she was recovered enough, she rolled onto her belly off of the annoying rock, curling her paws beneath. Magic had its cost. Her power was like a grain of sand to the sea. She sniffed. Ponies. Her ears twitched. A snort, a nicker, a herd of ponies, she thought, and something else. She sniffed again and sorted the scents. A puka.
So, for a little background, those who are listening, Allison has been, this is like pretty much when she just gets pulled into the lizard lair. One lizard came up and was like threatening everybody. This lizard killed another guard that didn't really follow his directions properly. And then he just walks out, the guy who's still alive. So that's where we start. Chapter 9, page 63, if you have the book. Allison stared at the limp body of the lizard and began to cry. He may have been a vile creature, but nobody deserves to die like that. She knelt down to touch Cordoba's blank face. His eyes were still open despite the absence of life in them. She shut his eyelids and said, "May you find peace." Allison, Werewolf said. She looked at him, and he nodded behind her to the rest of the room. Only just then did she notice that all of the other patients had sat up or propped themselves on elbows, and all their eyes were fixated on her. "How long have you all been awake?" No one responded. "Will they come back for the body?" Still, no response. "Can anyone tell me what I'm supposed to do with this poor creature?" Her voice was angry now. After more silence from the onlookers, Allison said, "Fine, I'll find someone who can." She knew it wouldn't work, but she tried to lift Cordoba herself. After managing only to strain herself and feel like a fool, she resigned to dragging Porpa by his hands. "Where are you going?" Verbal asked with panic in his voice. "I'm going to find someone who gives a dang about this poor animal. But they'll kill you. Then they can deal with my dead carcass as well," she said from the hallway. But, Verbal stammered as he fell off the cot. He got to his feet and limped after her. "Allison, you get your belligerent bottom back in there." "But nay, get off to the vile demon who killed this man. You be the best cursed soldier ever." With that, Allison heaved the body back down the way she had been led, leaving Wearable panic-stricken in the doorway. "Bloody demons killing anything they want," Allison muttered herself down the tunnel, hoping there might be one glimmer of hope in those dark lands. "You!" she said. The gray lizard looked up from his book so suddenly that he knocked his glasses off. As he put them back on, his face went from anger to confusion. "Me?" he said, pointing a finger to himself. "Yes, you! One of your friends killed this man and left him to rot without so much as a backward glance." "First of all," the gray lizard said indignantly, "I don't have any friends here. Secondly, these gentlemen," sarcasm was thick in his voice as he spoke for a gentleman, "kill whomever they please. Thirdly, you are just as likely to be killed, so why don't you scurry yourself back to wherever you belong?" "No, sir, I will not scurry myself back. I will show some decency in this godforsaken pit. You help me with this poor creature, or you'll have two bodies to deal with." Allison's voice echoed heavily down the corridors. Grey Lizard stood up. "Be quiet, girl. Fine, I'll help you so long as you keep your infernal racket down." He paused to look at her as if he were scrutinizing an unknown creature. "What's your name, girl?" Allison straightened herself up and responded boldly, though no longer yelling. "I am Allison Highfallow of Meadowvale. What might your name be, boy?" I think we can stop there. That is a great introduction to her.
Chapter 6. Declan actually laughed, causing Orlat and the old woman to stare in his direction. "What you find funny, young man?" "This is insane. She's just a baby owl found in the woods back home. Besides, I'm not even gifted. Why would some ancient magical being choose me for anything?" He ran the fingers of both hands through his long hair. The woman stared at Declan so long, he thought she might have fallen asleep with her eyes open. She seemed to stare through his chest. Orlat mirrored her stare, making the quiet moments even more uncomfortable. What are you staring at?" he finally asked, unable to take the silent scrutiny. "Bondmate, you are a child, wandering in the wild with no clue where you need to go. You think of magic as a tool, some dead thing to use, but it's alive. Magic knows and sees and grows. The daughter is wise and chose ya to be her champion. Do not be a fool and laugh at what you don't understand." The woman suddenly stood and placed Orla back on his shoulder, offering her a small bow as she stepped back a pace. Orla nuzzled his neck. "Mother, I mean no disrespect. This is a lot to take in, and I don't have time to learn all about magic. I came here looking for the Keeper because my people are in danger. I don't know how long we have before a powerful enemy invades, but there's no time to waste. Will you help me find him or not?" Declan was beginning to sweat through his shirt, and not from the tropical heat pouring through the garden. The woman regarded him a moment longer, then nodded. "I can't refuse the daughter and her bondmate, but I don't speak for the Keeper. He may choose to help, or he may not. Come with me. What I have to tell you can't be said out here." She turned and walked down a small path to the left of her seat.
Reading of Paige Papillon Paranormal Mysteries Book 1, Daunting Darkness. Bit of backstory for time. Paige has received an anonymous tip to go to a warehouse that she finds is filled with random evidence that looks straight out of a paranormal novel that she enjoys reading. What she found inside the boxes appear to be personnel files, but for whom? There was no company name, just a stamped seal with a bat that looked straight out of the Angel files. This case had a D next to the P, and Paige soon found out what that letter stood for. Every single file she opened had a large red DC stamped under it. Under the garish words, she could make out statistics and information on the people. Tiny passport photos were included in the forms. A handsome man with dark curls, a blond man with a mustache, a smirky man with a black buzz cut. All were gone, and there were only 3 of about 100 files in this box alone. But the dead told her nothing, unless they were this killer's previous victims. If so, that meant this wasn't an ordinary serial killer. This was a bloodthirsty monster. She decided to check another box of people who might be alive. She went up the ladder again, and as she grabbed another box and began to climb back down, a smaller stack began to sway from her movements. The topmost box fell over with an echoing crash. This was locked, but the fall shattered the rusty lock, spilling its contents all over the cement floor. As she glanced at the mess, she saw something that made her heart stutter in her chest. What was in the box looked like employee IDs for what appeared to be the FBI and MI5 of England. Dozens of them, all with different names and addresses, even different hairstyles, but all with the same face. Vera King's face. Paige gasped, glancing at the IDs. I could tell Vera once had over 24 aliases. Some were variations of her name and others more unusual. Once, she even used the Angel St. Vincent as a code name, as well as variations of the word. One place out of all the locations and more photographs that she didn't recognize was in England. There was no date and just the sentence, "First murder," where the monster was created. The file the photos had fallen out of detailed a serial killer, except the killer was described as a vampire, which Paige knew was impossible. Vampires weren't real. Of course not. Yet, the file didn't state that vampire was a code name. It acted like that was the killer's species. At the end of the file was one of the aliases Vera used, along with another man's name, and it read, "Executed suspect, downtown Chicago, November 2014. What on earth, Paige muttered. Vera didn't look like a housewife and novelist. She looked like Angel St. Vincent from the books. In an instant, everything she thought she knew about her benefactress went out the window, and she was questioning everything. Was Vera a murderer? Had she decapitated people with that sword on her hip? Did John know, or was he in the dark? Or worse, was he knowingly harboring a killer? While Paige was trying to make sense of all this, she heard the grating sound of the metal door opening behind her. She quickly began to stand, but before she could reach for her gun or even turn around, she heard a distinct click of a safety being disengaged. "This is private property. Hands up and turn around slowly before I turn you into Swiss cheese." Paige knew that voice, though it gave her little comfort now. Vera?
So I want to read a selection from the middle of the story Sirocco, focusing on the character Lana, which we spoke about. And here we go. As a rule, Alana kept her hair short between duties, arranging and growing her hair as needed for the different people she had to play. In this case, she had come to the far shores as a customer, wearing the same medium length she had worn on the Cristolo family yacht. An hour's worth of work, and the excess hair dissolved away down to her normal, close-cropped style. Gone was the makeup, and Alana lost her charming smile. Instead of a dab of cream to make her eyes look tired, she practiced making her face sag, keeping a perpetual look of exhaustion. Would suggest a worker who went through life with deadlines chasing her. Olana exited the hotel through a back door that conveniently didn't show on the boards. A quick change of outfit, and into the far shores walked an overstressed, highly trained plumber who doubled as an electrician and a programmer. Grail, the well-dressed manager from the previous day, greeted her. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We have a VIP client with a need for discretion. Can I see your security pass?" Alana handed the pass over, revealing beaten, scarred hands and fingernails that she had chewed off a few hours earlier. Always the small details, she reminded herself. Alana could tell the supervisor had been looking. Grail's sharp eyes made the mission more difficult. The manager understood the need for security and discretion. Time was of the essence for the hotel, but the supervisor checked and double-checked Alana's false credentials until the manager was satisfied. Without looking up, Grell dropped the credentials on the counter and pushed over an invoice to sign. Sign this. Alana did as instructed, just as any of the millions of service workers on Sirocco would have. Room 19, 11th floor. The supervisor did look up long enough to scowl at Alana while handing her her work order. Alana nodded once and headed off to the elevator. A woman in a business suit was waiting at the elevator on the 11th floor. The suit had enough room for the woman to move with freedom, should the situation warrant it. Alana owned several such suits. The woman checked her credentials and communicated with a companion at the door to the suite. Alana was allowed to proceed down the hall to another checkpoint before finally getting to the door. She was scanned and checked and physically searched. The agent doubted these goons could find where she had her special tools hidden, unless they stripped her down and tore apart her clothing and tools with a fine scanner. They'd have to get dirty, and getting dirty wasn't their preference. They sold dirty to others. Still, she admired the layered defense and the superficial thoroughness. It never occurred to them that anyone would get so close. It all went well. When Vin and her organization would never know, if all went well, then Vin and her organization would never know that someone had. Alana walked in and passed another guard. Two, in fact, were waiting by the door. One was clearly a member of Vin's organization, the other one painted as a different kind of professional. Tight black shirt, blue denims, combat boots, not so cleverly hidden beneath. He looked like a soldier that was out of uniform, playing at being subtle. But he wasn't subtle, not to the trained eye. At the bedroom door was another soldier not soldier alongside another of Vin's people. Alana could not believe her luck. Negotiations were happening right now. And if you wanted to read the rest of this, obviously, pick up The Language of Skeptics and read the full story Sirocco, which is the first story in the book.
Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from Beyond Sundered Seas, and it's kind of, a little bit at the near the start of the book, and it's when Colleen and Gretchen have met, and Gretchen is showing Colleen into his study. And the chapter is called The Scholar's Study. Marauder's Bluff, that is the name of it. That is the island's name, Graham replied, holding up a finger. And yes, that is they. But the stories are crazed experiments and the like are just that. Stories, a grand way of keeping unwanted visitors away. Aha, he grinned as he pulled out a small iron key. Come along, I have wanted to show my library to somebody new for decades. Colleen couldn't deny Gretchen's infectious excitement. Giving Turner one last look, she hurried to join him, hastening her heels as the old sparker unlocked the door and, with a grin, threw it open. A frown formed as she stepped inside. The small room consisted of a narrow bed, a moth-eaten armchair, a set of cupboards, and one rickety set of shelves crammed with books, most of them boasting spines so faded the words couldn't be read. It's not exactly homey, is it? Colleen remarked, hands on hips. Gretchen closed the door with his foot, and covered the package from his saddlebags in his hands, and gloom smothered the disappointing room. Also, I hate to tell you, seeing as you seem pretty excited about it, but most libraries I've seen have more than one bookcase. Gretchen raised an eyebrow, and crossed to the unit, beckoning Colleen to follow. Pick up the book, young Sparker, he murmured, nodding at one with a faded green spine. That one right there will do. Colleen glanced at the book, and then at Gretchen, then back at the tome again. Sighing, she reached out and laid her fingers on it. Is this one of your favourites, or is there some kind of... The creaking of wood from behind cut off her words. The floor had parted, revealing a flight of stairs leading below. Have a little faith, Colleen. Did you really think I would leave my library and all my research up here where anyone could simply walk in and find it? Gretchen was already halfway down the steps. I told you, I designed this place. People seldom had the chance to build themselves a secret underground vault. I would have been cheating myself if I didn't do just that, wouldn't I? Colleen could summon no words to argue with him, not a single one. The wooden steps creaked as she descended into darkness, cringing when the corruption stirred at the welcoming gloom. Thankfully, it didn't last long. Gretchen muttered a mouthful of inaudible words under his breath from somewhere in the darkness and, after a clicking sound, Soft blue light ballooned and spread through the underground chamber. Colleen came to a stop one step from the bottom, lost for words. She couldn't even swear. Books filled the walls of a space larger than even the room above. In fact, more of that room could have fit inside Gretton's secret library with space to spare. While there weren't any windows or natural light to speak of, the place oozed coziness to the most comfortable of degrees. There were books of all shapes and sizes, parchments too, organised no doubt in a way that pleased the old sparker. Shuttered gas lanterns filled alcoves between the shelves, the blue flames chasing away the underground darkness. But it wasn't a cave, nothing like it. The same type of wood used to build the upper house made up the floor, and rugs of rich reds, vibrant oranges and deep emeralds lay on the ground, softening Gretton's steps as he moved to a large desk opposite an empty hearth. 2 beds, both double, and a trio of comfortable-looking armchairs completed the library, along with a fully stocked drinks cabinet. Gretton eased the package he cradled like a babe onto the desk, then sighed as he turned and took in his abode. An expression of pure contentment spread across his face, a look he hadn't worn in Colleen's presence so far. It knocked 30 years at least off him, made him almost boyish, if boys had more wrinkles on their faces than a slept-in tunic. Colleen couldn't help but smile too. This room, his home, his library, was Gretton's happy place. The den where he could truly be himself, shut off from the order, from Halvelt, from everything. She moved off the stairs and turned, her smile growing wider, and tears stung her eyes. Framed maps filled the far wall, the only wall without books or parchment, all she assumed penned by his hand. There were drawings too, portraits of men and women reading or playing clanctor, or just existing. Peaceful moments captured for all time. Who are these people? Colleen asked, approaching the wall. Friends? Gretton didn't answer at first. Frowning, she turned. He'd moved up alongside her, footsteps quiet on the rug, and gazed at the wall. Sorrow had replaced serenity. These people were my... He sighed, and a tear trickled down his cheek. I never knew the word. They were more than friends. I loved each and every one, and I still do, even though many are long dead. Lovers then, Colleen murmured. A pencil drawing of Brina sketched itself in her mind. The dawn sunlight catching her hair and her eyes just so. Gretton shook his head. No, that never interested me, that rigorousness. Kissing, perhaps, embracing, absolutely. The rest, a messy business, that. He shook his head even harder, fingers rubbing against each other. I had this connection with them, and I would have died for them all, though I have never been a fighter. My drawings are my way of honouring them. Colleen reached out for the old man, but a last-second change of heart had her tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear instead. Which one is Tamaz? She asked. This one. Gretton took a step forward and pressed his palm against the glass of one of the frames. His head bowed. This is Tamaz. It showed a smiling, handsome man playing a guitar, the details so deep she'd recognise the man anywhere if she saw him in the flesh. It's beautiful. The drawing, the whole place. I'm happy you brought me here, Gretton. He turned, red rings lying in his eyes. Might he have survived? Gretton opened her mouth. Colleen opened her mouth and then closed it. She didn't know the details, but she knew too well all the events in Holtbolt increasingly turned out for the worst. Right then, though, Gretton needed her, and he craved a sliver of something she desired so much herself. He might have, she whispered, have hope, because without it, what reason do we have to live? To keep going, and if you can't find that hope, I'll try to muster it for you. Sniffing, Gretton nodded, then wiped at his eyes. Thank you. Now, we have much to catch up on. Would you like a drink? I have the finest Vellum brandy. Vellum brandy? Colleen remembered it all too well, the liquor burning her throat and rising to her head in Willow's broken bard all too well. Drock, why not? Don't let me drink too much though, right? Gretton laughed. Where's the fun in that? And that is where I'll leave it. That was Beyond Solities.
This is from Chapter 9 of Book 3. Just to give some context, so this is where there's a character named Captain Kize who is an enemy but now she has bonded a dragon, and she's sort of like come over to their side. And this is the point of conflict that's going to happen between our characters. And so it's kind of two scenes that are just back to back, but it starts out from Zaid's perspective, and then it'll switch to Nake's perspective. And I've kind of deleted a lot of Zaid's sort of commentary that I don't think is really relevant. But here we go. So this is chapter 9 of book 3, called Sparks Night. Zaid pushed Ishe behind him as he stared in shock at Captain Kize. He knew the 3-armed woman had nearly killed her when he had rescued his friends from her airship 2 weeks ago. He thought her dead, killed in the fight last night by Zani. Nake's roar shattered Zaid's surprise. The burly Reaver charged from the group and slammed a brutal axe at the woman, a blow that should have cut her in half if she hadn't formed a trio of metal blades and caught his attack. The metal dragon behind her growled and rose onto his legs. His tail swished behind him as his angry reptilian eyes fixed on Nake. Anger rumbled from the dragon, his claws sinking into the grass. Sparks snarled and charged across the lawn. The metal dragon turned to face her as Nake drew back his axe and hacked at Captain Kize. The 3-armed woman blocked his blows, using her curved sword to deflect his powerful attacks. Zaid's stomach sank. Spark and the metal dragon tensed, ready to pounce on each other. "Stop it!" roared Zaid as he sprang forward, forming a thick blade of darkness. He thrust the weapon between Nake and Captain Kize, catching both their attacks. "Stop this right now!" Captain Kize glanced at him and took a step back, lowering her weapons. Nake snarled like a boar, his beard bristling. "Stop!" His nostrils flared. "That bitch murdered Krieg. Blew him up." "I remember." Zaid faced the bigger man without flinching. He'd been in enough street brawls to know never to show fear. "She almost killed me too, remember?" "If you remember, why are you stopping me?" demanded Nate. Water dripped off the end of his nose. The drizzle became a downpour. "She's a knight," Zaid answered, the cold striking his face. "One of us." Nate spat. "I'm not one of you, boy. Lower your sword or what?" Zaid faced him. He couldn't show fear. "What will you do?" Zaid had his attention focused on Nake's axe that he missed the bruised left arm swinging. The amber fist slammed to the side of Zaid's head. He stumbled back from the blow, his mind sloshing. A fuzzy wave washed over his body. Nake roared and attacked Kize. She blocked with her 3 blades. "Zaid!" Ishe shouted. Zaid shook off the dazed and roared, "Stop right now, Nake. You don't give me orders, boy." "You think you can fight her and me?" Zaid demanded, raising his black blade up. "I can," Nate growled. "You won't just be fighting them," Ishe said. She came up beside Zaid with a ruby dagger in her hand. Nate snorted. "Put down that toy before you hurt yourself, girl. I don't fight women, even. Don't call her that." Zaid advanced, his anger shifted to Nate. "Stubborn, brash, and bullheaded. Put down your weapon, Nate. Now." "Krieg liked you, Zaid," Nate said, his attention focused on the captain. "So I'll let you walk away, but you push this boy, and I'll bury you with that tart." "No," Zani said and moved up on the other side of Nate. She had no weapon. "No, you won't, Nate." Hurt stabbed Nake's heart as Zani circled to stand by Captain Kize. The giantess didn't have a weapon in her hand. She stood ready for a brawl. "Even you?" he demanded. "She killed the man you loved." "I know," said Zani. And? Incredulity shot through Nate. His soul screams for vengeance. He lies in pieces because of her. "Your soul screams for vengeance." Zani fixed her green eyes on Nate. "Not Krieg. He's at peace. This isn't what he wants. Besides, I spared her already. I let her go." "Why?" Nate shook with fury. "She's one of us." Nate shook his head, the rain splashing cold across his bare chest. "It's not that simple." "No?" Zani trembled, her hands balled into fists. "No, it's not. But you kill her and you'll be fighting her dragon." "She won't be alone, Spark." Nake's dragon snarled in his mind. "I'll rip out his throat. Kill that bitch." "I won't be alone," Nake said, staring at Captain Kize. "So they get Spark killed with you, huh?" asked Zoni. "You'll die for what? Vengeance? Such a little thing." "Little?" His heart screamed in his chest. "It is everything. I've avenged everyone I've ever cared about. I won't stop now. Zani stepped between him and Captain Kizé, her hands open, her posture relaxed. Let's start with me. Cut me down. He stared at her. Bugger me. Why? Why protect her? She's a knight. One of only 10 of us. We're going to need every one of us. I feel it in my bones. That's why I let her go. So she can get away with her crimes. None of us get away with our crimes, Zaid said, his black sword vanishing. They're carved into our soul. She's been chosen, like you, like me and Zani. You think Krieg? Don't! The cold blizzard howled in Nixel. Don't speak like you have any idea what that man would have wanted. You barely knew him. Behind Zaid, purple butterfly danced. Beside it rested Nate. I was impatient once, and it cost me dearly. Krieg's words, spoken in the moments before his death, rose in Nake's mind. Then, Krieg and Nake had been discussing Zaid. Krieg had believed the boy had a destiny, would be a ruler. Krieg felt that destiny was important, all because of a spirit Krieg claimed was guiding the boy. A purple butterfly, an auspicious sign that flew around Zaid's head. Shit, muttered Zaid as he watched those purple wings dancing behind Zaid. Patient. I need a reason, a good one not to kill her. Zaid glanced at Captain Kizé. She must have had a good reason to come to us when she knows we despise her. What is it? And that's where we're going to end.
Filthy Henry flicked the light switch beside the bathroom door, plunging the landing into darkness. Whatever was in that bedroom needed light to see. It did not matter who your parents were, an eyeball was an eyeball. The only difference was that some eyeballs could work better in less light than others. Luckily, Filthy Henry had a trick up his sleeve that helped him see in the dark, something that came from his innate magical nature. After all, to be a fairy detective, you needed to see through the veil that separated the two worlds. Otherwise, you were just some madman running around the place. He closed his eyes for a second and turned on his fairy vision, his second sight, that brought down the magical curtain and allowed him to see the man behind it. To be politically correct, it allowed him to see the fairy creatures that inhabited the world, the magical realm that existed right beside the normal world, hidden from sight. He opened his eyes and looked around. Immediately, the world brightened, becoming varying shades of blue. It was like wearing night vision goggles, only without the actual need to look like an idiot wearing night vision goggles. Filthy Henry did a quick magical reserve check. So far, he had only cast the silencing spell today, which barely cost any energy to begin with. This meant that he still had a practically full magical tank in him, more than enough to cast one big spell or a lot of little ones. Given the disturbances that Jane had told him about over the phone, there was nothing all that dangerous up in the room. It was going to be an open and shut case, but it always paid to be prepared. He crept over to the bedroom door and pressed his ear against it, listening for any movement coming from the other side. There was nothing to be heard. Reaching down, Filthy Henry took hold of the door handle and slowly turned it, opening the bedroom door as quietly as possible. He peered into the room through the slight gap, but could see nothing moving at all. The shades of blue, better than any military-grade night vision scope, showed everything in perfect sapphire-tinted detail. Filthy Henry slowly moved his head around the door to get a look at the rest of the room. The room was your typical bedroom. A double bed in the centre of the floor, lockers on either side of it with lamps on them. Along the back walls stood a large wardrobe. The windows had their blinds pulled closed, but a little bit of light from the street shone through. Then Filthy Henry spotted movement on the far side of the bed. There was a creature rummaging around in the top drawer, sniffing at things as it pulled them out before discarding them to the floor and searching in the drawer once more. It was no taller than 1.5 feet at the most, with a scrawny frame that would have made a weight-concerned skeleton consider going on a diet. 2 elongated ears spread out like small wings on the creature's head, a pointed cap perched between them, which was at a jaunty angle. Filthy Henry was somewhat relieved at the sight of the creature. There was always a chance that one of these seemingly standard cases would result in a nasty surprise. It made a degree of certainty to the job that he hated. But here it was, nothing more than a simple red man. A child could handle one of these without resorting to magic. Red men were one of the lowest forms of fairy in the fairy world, mainly because they had very little to offer, very little to even justify being classed as a fairy. They were notorious for just being pranksters, although their definition of what constituted a prank was wildly different from the ones shared with the rest of the world, be it human or fairy. A few centuries ago, the King of the Fairies had tried to reclassify the Red Men race as deformed humans, wanting to trim the evolutionary tree of fairy kind and make them man's problem. It was not a bad plan, as plans went, only the execution part of it failed. The Fairy King had slightly lost his mind and made the declaration in the middle of his hall, stark naked. It is kind of hard to follow the instructions of royalty while you are avoiding an accidental eyefall of wobbling genitalia. As a result, the king was quickly removed from power and the Red Men continued being fairies. Since the Red Men played pranks on whomever they wanted, regardless of race, it was not uncommon to find one living in a human house causing mischief. They had no real magical powers at all, as if it was the entire race had slept in on the day useful parts of being a fairy were handed out. They could avoid being seen by humans if they wanted, a feat that was impressive as holding your breath, but that was about it. Filthy Henry brought up his right foot quietly, pulled his shoe off as silently as possible. He took aim and, like a ninja short on cash for the throwing stars, lobbed the shoe towards the creature's head. The shoe sailed through the air with the grace of a duck falling from the sky. It flew over the bed and connected with the side of the Red Man's head, knocking the creature sprawling to the ground. Filthy Henry wasted no time. As soon as the shoe had left his hand, he entered the room fully, closed and locked the door behind him, then flicked on the light switch.
Thanks for watching, guys. Remember, it's always time to go indie now.